Bum bum bum, literature gets a look. Legs talk about books. Hello and welcome to Legs Talk About Books, the monthly literature podcast where we talk about books. I'm your host, Hardleg Joe. Joining me today, original co-host, the OG CB Radio.
CB, that's me.
Yeah, I might also call him Brandon from time to time.
I feel like that, since that was the name given at birth, I feel like that's appropriate.
Yeah, your name doesn't fit like Hardleg Joe, where I could just add it on. Like, you're CB or you're Brandon. It might be either way.
Yeah.
If you're new here, every month we read a new book, and then we talk about it, as the title implies. And this month's book was American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Not a requested book, but a requested author. A lot of people kind of fans of his work. It's got a very contemporary style, very new. Even though we've done some people from the 80s and 90s before, a lot of them, like Robert Jordan when we're talking about Wheel of Time, kind of an old style. And then, of course, we had the Lovecraft, we had the fantasy, and this is very new wave, very original and different.
It's more of a modern fantasy than what we're usually used to doing, because we've been doing hard fantasy or hard horror. This is more of a kind of like, let's blend modern tropes with fantasy elements.
Yeah, and at least in my experience, Neil Gaiman is a much more, I guess, mature author would be a way to put it. We might talk about this later.
Yeah, that'll definitely be part of this sentence.
Yeah, but a lot of the stuff we've done before, it's fantasy. It almost feels kind of like shonen-y, for lack of a better word.
It's a bit of a strange title to put on top of it.
No, this isn't shonen-y. I'm saying a lot of the stuff we did earlier, stuff like Mistborn, stuff like Furies of Calderon. It had this much more like young boy's adventure story, where this is clearly written for adults, clearly not meant to be like super exciting. It's more meant to be like a realistic depiction of life almost.
To be honest, yeah, what we have been reading was a lot more of the hero's journey, and this one kind of throws that out the door.
Yeah, and the reason we chose this one specifically, well, first of all, the name, it's a very dynamic sounding name.
Yeah.
It's very iconic, but also it recently got turned into a series on Starz, live action series, which you have seen, or have you only seen parts of it?
I've seen the first season, and the second season I haven't caught as much of, but yes, this one was fell into the usual trap of the book was better.
The book was far better. I've read a description of how I read like synopses of the episodes.
Yeah. And
I was surprised where it's like, yeah, they nailed 2 or 3 things, and then everything else they just like completely went off the rails, especially in the later seasons. But we'll talk about that later. That's just sort of part of the reason why we chose this book. And if you're new here, what we do is we sort of start by doing our overall thoughts about the book, sort of a spoiler-free review, usually just for first few minutes. And then after that, it's just going to be talking about the story, talking about the things we did that did interestingly, things that we liked. We don't really give like a whole plot interview. We're going to assume that you've read the book or you're not going to read the book. Either way, we're not going to hold back on it. But first,
go for gray area.
Yeah, but first, overall thoughts. Brandon, what did you think of this book? Who would you recommend this book to?
I would recommend it to somebody who's really interested in a different take on like modern fantasies, like your Dresden Files and your other things like that, because it is a very unique styling of that, and it's very Neil Gaiman and it's such. But in my own personal opinion, the hype I don't think is near as warranted.
Yeah.
Don't flay me alive on this. I just didn't find it as engrossing a story.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree on that. I have a lot of people on the Discord, at least a couple who are really big super fans of Neil Gaiman. And after reading this, I don't really get it. He's not bad by any means, but I didn't come away, like, blown away. Like, the first time I read Alan Moore, like, I read Watchmen, and I was blown away by how amazing it was. That I wanted to read his other stuff. And with this, I'm like, I don't really get the big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of the same way I feel about, like, Patrick Rothfuss. I've said to everybody that wants to read a book near me or around me, you need to check out The Name of the Wind or the Kingslayer stuff. And this one, I would be like, so you like modern fantasy? Maybe try out American Gods?
Yeah. Overall, I felt it was a little aimless. I didn't particularly like any of the characters. None of the characters were bad, but I also didn't get invested with any of them. I didn't really get invested in the story all that much. And while it does have themes, And I've got to give it, having themes is something I love in a story. I love when a book can tell a compelling story about interesting characters, but then also have broader themes that you can analyze and discuss, where it sort of has something to say. That was kind of my problem with something like Furies of Calderon, or to a lesser degree, I'm reading Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is really compelling, but it doesn't really say anything, as far as I can tell, or at least it doesn't focus on it. This one does have some really good themes. They're just themes that have to deal with, like, faith and the supernatural and sort of your relationship with what you believe, and none of that really speaks to me in any way. But if that's an idea that you like to explore, if that's an idea you like to see in fiction, then I would definitely recommend this, because I think it has a lot to say about faith and our relationship with the gods and how we feel about mythology and our shared heritage of it.
Mm-hmm. It also has a lot to talk about America in general and how it's viewed by foreigners and faith-based alike, really.
Yeah. It is one thing. Neil Gaiman is from Britain.
Yes.
But he writes about Middle America. This whole story sort of takes place in the Midwest.
It's just like the most in-depth I think I've ever read in a story that didn't just deal with Middle America. It was, for a fantasy book, it was actually really refreshing to be like, I've been there.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't talk about specific places we had been before.
I meant, like, kind of like when he talks about a town square, felt like several small American towns that I've been to.
Yeah.
Felt very much like that.
The one thing I'd say he's really good at is he's really good at settings. He's really good at describing places. And reading this book, I feel like he captured Middle America, like, perfectly. When he's driving along the highway and he stops at, like, diners or he stops at a small town or a hotel, it feels exactly like it does when I've driven around in this area. And so I think if you really like the American Midwest and you want to see it captured really well, or if you are a foreigner, maybe you live on the East Coast, or maybe you're English and you want to kind of know what more rural suburban America is like, he captures the feel of it really, really well in this book. And there's kind of a road trip aspect to it. He drives around to a lot of different places, and that can be kind of fun as well.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a different take on, again, the hero's journey, going from town to town in Middle America, just not as, like, fantasy feeling, but it still feels as warm and as homely as that.
Yeah, there's still, all the places have a lot of character while still feeling realistic. I guess that's sort of what Neil Gaiman is good at, sort of making this nice combination where it's still clearly a fantasy, but a lot of these people feel like real people. The places especially feel like real lived-in places.
To put it a bit, like, he's really able to fold in a fantasy.
Fold a fantasy into an existing setting really
there
well. So yeah, not a must-read for everyone. Not something I would be like, oh, you've got to read this, it'll change your life, or you've got to read this, it has amazing things in it. But if you have an interest in mythology, if you're interested in Middle America, or you want to read something that, like, explores faith and people's relationship with it, highly recommend American Gods. So that's pretty much our reviews. If you haven't read the book yet and you think you'd want to, go ahead, go read it, go check it out. I wish we could say, like, here's an Audible link or anything, but we don't have one of those yet. Maybe someday. Maybe someday, we could hope.
Anybody here actually does anything for Audible, just send us a thing.
We got like 400 viewers. I doubt any of them works at Audible. They would have let us know by now. But,
who knows?
Maybe someday. But either way, go check it out. From here on in, we're just going to be talking spoilers. We're going to be diving into the story and its themes and its characters, what we liked about it, and what it did unique, different from all the other stories we've read. Although before we get to the interesting themes themselves, I did want to talk a little bit about the differences between the show and the book, because since you've read both, and some people here might have seen the show.
Well, the show definitely focuses in on different characters a little bit more. There are certain characters that are only in what we'll be talking later as a cutaway story parts of it, that they fully flesh out into characters that actually do and enact into the actual story.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I was struck with when I was reading the synopses of the episodes and, like, reading the Wikipedia article basically about it, was that in the book, this is entirely Shadow's story. It follows Shadow all the time, and the only time it leaves his narrative viewpoint are these in-between chapter sections where it talks about mystical stuff happening in America, kind of these world-building segments. Whereas in the show, like, it seems as though they have entire episodes based around, like, Mad Sweeney, or Odin, or all these other characters where it follows them around and goes on their adventures.
Admittedly, the characters that he postulates in these books are rather larger than life, but I don't think they would have required an entire episode for each of them, which is kind of what makes the entire show kind of drag on a little bit.
Yeah. That's the other thing, especially reading about part 2. It seems like they've got more invested in the lore than they are with the actual story. Especially when it comes to if you're unfamiliar with the very basic idea, there's the old gods of mythology, like your Thor, as well as like mythical heroes, people like Anansi the Spider. In this case, Johnny Appleseed was a character in there. Or
Navajo Joe.
Yeah, Navajo Joe, Whiskey Jack, I think his name was.
Whiskey Jack.
So you have these old characters from mythology, and then you have the new gods, which are created sort of by the thoughts and beliefs in the land. Like, for example, the big one is there's a god of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, he's so young and new, he's like a teenager, and they just call him, I think, the Digital Boy?
Tech Boy.
Tech Boy. He doesn't even have a name. They just call him, like, the Tech Boy. But in the show, they treat him as, his name is Tech Boy. And then, like, he has a story arc where he becomes Quantum Boy because of computers getting better or something like that.
It's that and a little bit of they needed to switch out the actors on
some stuff, yeah. But the point is, in the story, the new gods are very mysterious. There's no mythology associated with them, and the old gods don't really understand them.
Mm-hmm.
You're sort of given hints, and it leaves you wanting to know more about it, but I think that's what made it so compelling. Whereas the show is just like, we're going to explore and focus on the new gods, and you're going to learn the rules about them, and they're going to be inconsistent.
Here are their stats.
Yeah, here are their
Here's
stats.
what their favorite color is. Yeah.
Yeah. There's cool stuff. I like how they talk about the god of the railroads.
Oh, yeah,
where they're like,
cool.
there's just like a brief you never meet him, but there's a brief mention where the old gods are talking about how worried they are at the new gods. And one of the old gods remarks like, don't you remember the god of railroads? 100 years ago, that guy thought he was the biggest shit. He was so powerful. Now he's an old, frail man, barely remembered, barely has any power. All the rest of these will be splash in the pans, too. And it sort of gives you an idea of, like, how evolving these characters are.
Their lifespan and all that stuff.
Yeah. But having an actual story just talking about the god of railroads would probably not be as interesting as it sounds.
There's a joke to be had in there about being railroaded, but we're going...
But yeah, other than focusing on a lot of different other characters and obviously changing some stuff about the plot, was there any other big differences that you did or didn't like?
They changed some of the characters specifically, like... And we'll get into this later, but the character of Anansi the Spider in the book was this kind of old man, and in the show, they made him this tall. Yeah, the actor's playing him is like 50, but he's one of those 50-year-old guys that is just like, he doesn't look 50. He looks like he's still in his late 30s.
Yeah.
So you don't get this feeling like he's a frail old man.
Yeah, a lot of the old gods are really old age-wise, because the idea is sort of like the less people believe in them, the sort of older they get, the more frail they get.
Yeah.
And looking at the cast, it seems like everyone's a lot younger than they appear in the book.
Yes. Well, some of them fit their age, and then they actually added in characters that weren't even in the book. Like, in one of the stories, they talk about Vulcan, the god of the Forge in Greek mythology, and dealing with him being recruited by the new gods. It's
to build weapons and guns and stuff for them. Yeah, again, it goes into more of the mythology, whereas this one kind of just focuses on a couple of... Really, the only characters that they go super into the mythology in are Odin and kind of the Egyptian gods. But even they're kind of, like, relegated to the side. You don't learn a whole lot about them.
Yeah, it all feels kind of like they're a fan of the book, whereas the book itself is kind of like a fan of mythology.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting way to put it. The book is just a fan of mythology. The show is a fan of the book and trying to explore what the book did. Whereas the book wasn't really concerned with explaining itself. Which I guess should go ahead. We're going to skip over one of these points, because I want to talk about the lore and the magic. Because it's really inconsistent in this book. Which I'm pretty sure is done on purpose. He didn't want to have, like, a hard magic system for the gods.
Or else you'll be, like, each one will be like, who's the better god?
Yeah, you can get into power scaling, that whole community. Where it's like, what are the themes of the story? And they're like, who cares? The important part is who could beat who in a fight. But in this one, it's so inconsistent that it kind of is almost to its detriment. I think the main thing that bothers me is this idea that they go in depth about how the gods exist because of belief in them.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, the god Odin, he goes by Wednesday. Because if you didn't know, a lot of the names of our days of the week come from Norse mythology. Thursday is Thor's day.
Yep.
And Odin comes from, Wednesday comes from Odin.
Woden's day, as
Yeah. It got evolved quite a bit. But the point is, he changes his name to Wednesday because every time people talk about Wednesday or they mention Wednesday, they're very indirectly giving some faith to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that the gods aren't these pre-existing characters that existed in mythology and came over to America. They were created in the minds of the people of America and given life by their faith. But at the same time, he's also the god of the gallows, and he has all these powers and things that... This was written in the early 90s, before the Thor movies and the Marvel Universe really took off, where no one really knew much about Odin other than he was the father of Thor.
And even then, the Marvel stuff, if you wanted to push that out there, that it didn't really deal with that side of him.
Yeah, the sort of dark... I had no idea that people were hung to give tribute to Odin, or dogs were hung.
Yeah. I didn't know of just, his really awkward powers about, if he seduces a woman, that woman is his. She will love no other man but him. Okay, come on.
There's the thing where he goes on this whole tangent about his many, many powers, and he's like, I can lay my hands on a child and I will know how that child dies.
Admittedly, it was kind of a really cool scene there.
Oh, yeah.
The best part about that scene isn't so much that he's, grandiose and boast about it. He just kind of goes, flat-faced and just starts rattling off his abilities.
Yeah.
It's kind of hey, this is the stuff that was literally printed on my body.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When Shadow doubts him, he's sort of you don't understand who I am. I have, the 32 powers. I know the names of the gods. All of them. I can do this. I can do that. If I can touch someone and they will never die in battle, or they will never die a violent death. I can see into something, I forget. He had a whole bunch. I didn't really look into him.
To bring that back to the first point, the sequence in which he does that is kind of downplayed in the show, but on the opposite end, in the book, when he reveals that he's Odin to him, is kind of meh, but in the show, it's this, the camera spins around him, he starts, a thundercloud is around his head, and he starts screaming out these things about himself, and it's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt left down when the book happened. I'm okay.
Yeah, the book doesn't really know how to do these big, high drama moments, I don't think, but we'll get to that later. But it's just the idea that, Odin, despite being crafted by Americans, has all these ideas about him and all these properties that no American alive would really associate with him unless you were, really, really into mythology, really studied him.
Again, back to being kind of a love letter to mythology in this book.
Yeah. And the same thing, especially Chernobog.
Yeah, who the hell is Chernobog and those three sisters?
Yeah.
We have no idea. Nobody worships them.
As far as I could tell doing research, almost all the information actually about Chernobog is gone. It was wiped from history. If you don't know, Chernobog is this god of darkness from Eastern Russian mythology. And when the Orthodox Christians came in, they just basically got rid of all their old mythology. And, Wikipedia has very little about it. Even searching outside, in places about mythology, all they have is a lot of broad speculation. So the fact that this character would even exist at all in America when he barely exists in Russia today, unless, I don't know, maybe there's a bunch of Russian sources talking about it that haven't been translated.
I doubt it, because even if you did that, he would have had to have gone...
Obviously, he does his research.
He likes it.
But does he speak Russian?
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like he went too much into it just to be hey guys, have you heard about this thing called mythology?
Yeah.
I really like it. I think you guys all like it too.
I think I wrote down, he wants to have his cake and eat it too, in the sense that he wants to include obscure, heavily researched mythological information where he's I spent time in a library learning about Chernobog, and I'm going to put him in, Even if it doesn't make sense with the themes or the lore that he's established of, he exists because people believe in him.
Oh, so Neil, you're going to put him in as a side character, like, very, very minor, right?
Like, no, he's one of the main cast, pretty much. I mean, he doesn't do a whole lot, but he's always there.
Yeah, he's literally in most of the scenes after he's brought in there.
Yeah, and to be fair, he does have, like, one of the coolest moments at the end.
Oh, yeah.
The resolution of his plot is the best.
Ding.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ding. If you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about, but we're not going to give it away, because that's one of the cooler moments.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, going back, talking about mythology in general, that brings us to the first point I actually wrote down, which is the interesting relationship this story has with the pre-existing knowledge. Because it's based off of mythology, you're kind of expected to know a little bit about it going in.
Yeah.
I think I used the reference. It's not like when you go into Harry Potter, you're not expected to know what historical wizards were about. They have their own rules. They will explain it to you. Same thing with a lot of places. I guess some vampire stories will assume you know a little bit about vampires. This one is kind of weird because I really can't tell reading it if it was designed for people who liked mythology or if it was designed for people who don't know anything about mythology.
As a defense, though, if he did put in all that information about the characters and all the myths and all the stuff around them, the book would probably be about 3 times longer.
Yeah.
He had to shore it down enough.
That's the thing. It is still really long, and it still does fit in a lot of external information that has almost nothing to do with anything, just because he's trying to tell you about mythology. Yeah. The cutaways, we'll still get to those in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, particularly it's really strange because a lot of the drama relies on you knowing who the characters are, but a lot of the mystery relies on you not knowing things about mythology. The biggest example being Wednesday is Odin. It's something that, like, if you know about mythology, if you know just the basics about where the names of the days come from, you're introduced to Mr. Wednesday and you know the title is American Gods, and you immediately like, oh, Wednesday, that's Odin.
Yeah, when he telegraphs himself by saying, "Today's my day," and I'm like, it's Odin. I didn't read the book, but when I saw the show, immediately I'm like, that's Odin. He's Odin. When is he going to say he's Odin? I waited so many episodes.
I remember I was talking to Bootleg Drew about this, and he's big mythology buff. And as soon as I mentioned Mr. Wednesday, he's like, oh, that's Odin. Like, I didn't really know that. So when his reveal came, I was like, oh, neat. That makes sense. That's kind of cool. But to you, like I said, really underwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think if they had made a big deal about it like they did in the show, it would have been that much bigger of a flop. Because you already knew as soon as you met him that he was Odin, and you just had to reveal it to Shadow.
Admittedly, like, the first third of the book is Shadow coming to terms with the idea that he is around, like, figuring out this mystery slightly to himself, except for the fact that everybody in the audience is like, they're gods.
Yeah.
They're gods. We figured this out. It's on the book cover. You could have said this, like, 5 minutes in, and had him wrestling with the idea, but now you just have him...
Yeah, it's a little slow. Depending on how much you know about mythology, the front is either really slow or kind of fast.
Yeah.
Or in the same vein, there's a part later on where they introduce you to one of Odin's friends, who is this big, stocky, muscular character, and they think his name is Elvis, and then at the end there's sort of this like, no, it's Alvis, ... Who's that? I don't know anything about that. I don't know if that's impactful. Does he have cool powers that I should know about? Whereas someone like Bootleg Drew, who knows all these characters, would be like, oh, that's Alvis. That's a game changer. That means this. Yeah. It's this character. There's a lot of, like, almost fan fiction-y cameos from all these characters where if you know about mythology, you're like, oh, there's that guy. There's that guy. And if you don't, it's like, oh, there's a woman walking around and she has a bandolier of skulls and she has blue skin. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Neat.
Shiva, if it's me, I'm like, yeah, that's obviously Shiva, but then someone who doesn't know anything about it is just like...
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I was just like, okay, blue-skinned skull woman, you got it. Yeah. Whatever that means.
Be old and respected. That's her. And then there are other characters that he just flat out doesn't say anything about.
Oh, are you talking about the Las Vegas guy?
There's a guy from Las Vegas that shows up twice in the book, and you never get an understanding as to who he is, and it haunts me in the night. like, if somebody knows who that is, please send us information. But they just, like, they literally actively in the story, like, smoke screen any information about him other than what he does.
Yeah, there's an important plot-centric character that they meet in Las Vegas, and the whole idea is no one seems to see him unless he talks to you, and he can tell you things, and it sort of, like, changes up your luck. I assumed it was, like, the god of casinos, or, like, the god of luck, but it could just as easily be some character from mythology I'm just not familiar with.
Also, he's not actually plot-centric. He does nothing other than those two scenes where he's just, like, in the car, Shadow asks what his name is, they tell it to him, he doesn't remember or understand when somebody says it. Then later on, Odin goes and talks to him and says stuff like, you should join us, and he's like, no, and then the scene's over. I'm very upset by this. This is
You want to know the lore, like, TV show, where are you at?
Why did you do this to me, Neil Gaiman? It's so weird.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry, had to get that off my chest.
Yeah.
Thank you, Let's Talk About Books, for dealing with
letting me vent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of moments. Again, the sort of fan fiction, I guess we can go into that. There's sort of this fan fiction feel, where there's a lot of like, here's a cameo, here's a reference, let's show off how well the characters are, or let's show off these well-known characters. And the main character, kind of a bland, generic dude who just goes around meeting the gods.
He's literally a reverse Mary Sue.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have...
Well, he's still kind of got Mary Sue stuff, but he handles it really well. We'll get to Shadow's character later on. Yeah. But needless to say, he's still like, this guy, he's a vehicle for meeting all the gods, and it has this really fan-fiction-y feel that only kind of works because you're free to do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So a slight tangent, because a lot of people ask me about fan fiction, and I really, really dislike fan fiction, because I feel as though most good fan fiction stories could be standalone stories. I feel like if you've got an interesting story to tell, and you choose to set it in a pre-existing universe, you have to compromise on the story you want to tell, because, for example, you have to have it do Batman, and Batman only acts a certain way.
Mm.
So even though if you want to tell this story, it would be better to have someone who can kill, you do it with Batman and he doesn't kill, and then you have to work around it. Either that or you do the opposite, where you tell it with Batman, and then you do have him kill someone. You're twisting the character to meet your thing, and you're making the character act in a way they wouldn't act.
Either one's gonna die and the other one's gonna live. Essentially, like, your story could die to the idea that it is a Batman story, for the example's sake, or the Batman part might have to die for it. There's very rarely a good
reason.
Symbiosis there. Also, this is just a call out to everybody. You know, a Hardleg fanfiction wouldn't go amiss.
You could do fanfiction about me because there's no lore or like characterization really. Plus, there's like no stakes or anything. Most of that like fanfiction is just goofy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing goofy, funny fanfiction, that's fine. But it always kind of bothers me when someone wants to tell a serious story about someone dealing with loss or death, and instead of creating an original character and worlds, they shoehorn it into an existing universe.
As a person who attempts to write, making characters is hard.
Yeah. And this one kind of suffers from a little bit of that. There's kind of some parts where, because the characters have mythology, you had to kind of fit it in with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the lore inconsistencies kind of help alleviate that. Because if he needs the gods to do something that their mythological counterpart wouldn't do, he can explain it as, oh, this is the American Thor,
version,
this is the American Odin, they can do things kind of differently.
Like,
and it doesn't feel too out of place.
Odin wouldn't rob a bank, no, but American Odin would.
Yeah, which feels kind of lazy. Again, kind of like he wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to show off these characters, but he also wants them to be what the story needs them to be. And overall, it works, but it still has this unusual feeling where everything doesn't quite fit together.
Yeah.
It's clearly more interested in the themes than the lore or consistency, and that I could see how that could really rub people the wrong way.
And that actually kind of does bring into the next point about like how the main character is rather bland, but it also reflects how the handful of characters that he has that are quote-unquote original and aren't actually tied to any mythology are kind of meh.
I don't know, the sheriff's pretty nice.
The sheriff was pretty nice, but most of the human characters, they were pretty non-existent. They didn't have much interesting about them, except maybe one, and I don't want to talk about her.
The Native American girl, or the half Native American girl?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was cool. I really liked his wife. I thought she had a cool redemption arc.
She did, but she was also kind of a plot device.
A little bit, but she also, I don't know, we could talk about her, like, all day, because she was really interesting. And I really hate what they did with her in the show.
Yeah.
Because in the book, she's like a revenant, essentially. Like, she's brought back to life, but her body is not healing. She's kind of like a zombie almost. Like, she's still falling apart. She's still a cold corpse.
In the book, she tries to get a part-time job, which is hilarious.
Yeah, she's like, I have a skin condition. I just want to work nights. She just has a hood up all the time, just working at this gas station to try to get some money.
The smell's too bad.
Yeah. And I really like that they could have a character who, like this female character who does stuff, who is interesting, and is also just like utterly gross.
Yes.
And in the show, they have this thing where she meets a god, and the god just gives her a new, beautiful, young body.
Oh,
because they're like, we don't want to have our main female lead be like a walking corpse. That's gross.
I would probably be more along the lines if they didn't want to spend that much money on makeup. But...
Yeah, it could be either one. But I sort of feel like it has this thing like, oh no, if she's a good character, she has to be pretty.
Yeah, the Shadow character, though, the main character, is kind of He doesn't really have anything that...
He doesn't have a whole lot of personality traits other than he likes coin tricks.
Which, to put on another tangent, makes me want to do magic so bad, but also it upsets me because he doesn't describe it well. I can't picture what he's doing. He just uses the words like, and then he vanished it into another hand. I'm like, freaking tell me.
It's really weird because he tries to explain the coin tricks actually in a lot of detail, but he uses like technical magic words. Like you can tell he was reading a whole bunch of books on like how to do coin tricks, because he talks about like he palms it in his offhand while then doing a flourish with his other hand, and I'm like, what does it mean to palm a coin? What does it mean to flourish it? Like, I think it would have worked better if they just explained it from like other people's perspective. They could have just said like, you know, he closes his hand and he opens it and it disappears, and they could mention, but they always seem to go into like the steps. At least it spends like a whole page describing how he does a single coin trick, and yet I don't understand how he did the coin trick.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's kind of a bland character. His only really defining trait other than that is just that he's patient, and he thinks things through.
And he really takes chances.
Yeah. It's weird because they managed... We're talking about how bland he is, but I think that actually works to his advantage. Mm-hmm. I think he's a really compelling character because he doesn't have a whole lot of big flaws, where there's a lot of characters who lie in like a story, or they deceive someone, or they get angry, and you're just like, why are you doing this? I hate you. Stop it. You're making such bad mistakes. And Shadow doesn't really do that. He's always like a reasonable person. His only flaw is that talking with his wife, she's like, you never take chances. You never do something extreme. You never feel these big emotions. You don't have faith in something bigger than yourself.
It's like his wife discovered that he is literally a vehicle for a story.
Yeah.
Like, oh crap, this is a narrative. You should be doing things. You're the main character. I've been reading the book. You haven't been doing anything.
You haven't just been following orders for the most part. Although they do a really good job at the beginning. I really like...
The Mead?
The Mead? No, not the Mead, even before that. I really like the characterization in prison, where he's talking about he has a cellmate. The cellmate's been there for like 5 years. He gets out, and he's arrested the next day and put back in jail for like another 5 years. And he talks about how he got out, and he wanted to get like on a plane to visit his kids, and the plane got delayed. And he starts arguing with the airline people because they disrespected him. Mm-hmm. And Shadow's like on the side, like, if you're in prison and someone disrespects you, you have to fight with them, you have to argue, because if you're weak, they'll descend upon you if they see any sign of weakness. And this guy was like, you know, he's been in prison for 5 years, he thinks someone's disrespected him, he has to fight them. And of course that puts you back in jail. And the guy who gets put back in jail, his lesson is, airline people be crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, they're fucking bitches. And Shadow's thing is, maybe what you use to live in one environment does not work in another environment.
Who would have done thought of that?
Who would have done thought? He's like, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't say it.
Because it might be helpful for that character.
Yeah. So there's this thing, like, he immediately gets out of jail after 3 years, finds out that his wife is dead, which is, like, tragic, because he basically went to jail for her.
Yeah.
And then
Which they never describe.
Yeah, they never describe exactly what he did, other than he beat some people that were involved in another crime or something like that.
Yeah, they do describe it. Sorry, he just beat some people that wronged him, and they found out.
It was him and a couple other guys had, like, robbed something or embezzled funds from something. That part they don't explain, but the people kept more money than they were supposed to.
They kept all of it, not their share.
Yeah, and then Shadow just beat the shit out of them. And then, of course, they couldn't tell them that they were involved in a larceny scheme. So I believe Shadow got his money, and his wife got the money, and the people couldn't, like, tell the judge that they had stolen money and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So Shadow just had to be like, yeah, I beat them for no reason, I'm just a violent thug, and they put him in jail for 3 years for assault.
6 years, originally.
Yeah, he got off early for really good behavior. But there's this part, like, he's clearly stressed, he's clearly worried, he's trying to get on a plane home, and he's just going to all the people who work for the airlines, and they're giving him sort of this runaround, and all time he's just breathe, explain, my wife is dead, I just got out of jail, I need as much assistance, if you could please help me, I would very thoroughly appreciate it. And he's just trying to be a really nice guy, and it's so refreshing to see a character who's just like, here's the truth of the situation, and I would appreciate assistance. And he does eventually get on a new plane.
My favorite part about that is actually when during this hopscotch of flights, he actually steps off the plane for a minute, and the plane actually departs without him, and he doesn't yell like, throw his coat down and get, damn it. He's just like, I'm gonna go rent a car. Yeah. He does that and gets to the next air stop. Yeah. He's just a very practical, very reasonable person, and I really like that in a character, even if it is kind of bland. Mm-hmm. Because it facilitates him doing what he needs to do, and he has just enough character development. Yeah, there's a bit of a turn in character, not enough to be like, hey, this dude was a super interesting character.
Yeah. But it gets to the end, and he decides to have faith in something, to have faith in Odin, and to actually, like, sacrifice his life for something. He doesn't even need to do it, but he's just sort of like...
Multiple times they tell him,
yeah,
you don't need to do this, man. You don't need to do this.
Yeah, another god can do this, another, like, immortal can do it, and they will survive. Like, you will not survive if you do this ritual. And he's like, I want to do something crazy in my life for once. I want to do something exciting, and I believed in this guy, and I still believe in this guy, and I'm going to go through this. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty compelling. And then afterwards, he
Mary Sue's.
He gets brought back to life, because it wouldn't be a story about gods if someone didn't resurrect.
Yep.
And then it goes to the climax, which is, in our opinion, kind of poorly written.
Very, very poorly written. Like, it's, to describe the scene for you, it is an awesome sounding thing. We already had spoilers.
Yeah.
He literally rides a Thunderbird across America to stop a war between new and old gods. He actually gains the abilities of his father in the sense that he commands lightning and goes in this back doors place between worlds and all stuff.
Yeah, the world of the gods that, like, exist overlapping with our world. They mention it a couple times. Odin can, like, transfer him into it. But then, like, after he awakens from being resurrected, he can seamlessly walk backstage, as they call it.
And he they do all this, like, really interesting
stuff. Yeah, he calls down the Thunderbird, and he rides the lightning between the clouds. They're like a lightning flash, and he zooms ahead faster than he can even think. And he's like, oh, shit. Except for the way Gaiman writes it is just this very kind of like...
And this happened. And
this happened. He doesn't have a over-the-top dramatic flair that you really kind of need for a guy riding the lightning.
But on that same turn, like I said, he gained all the abilities. There is this little subtle thing that I really, really liked about it, is that throughout the book, he has trouble with, like, certain characters' names. Like you said, he can't hear Elvis, and instead he hears Elvis, and he has that problem with with the Chernobog and his 3 sisters that are there. He has trouble saying their names and all stuff. And later on, when he goes back to them, he doesn't mess up. He doesn't stop. He just says their name.
He knows the names of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And again, from a character standpoint, it's really nice. They built his character. He had a nice, satisfying arc. And I think what I really like about it is that there's so many characters where their arc is they lack confidence and then they gain confidence. And this was kind of that, except for even though Shadow lacked confidence in the early parts of the story, or he lacked faith, rather, he never seemed incompetent.
Yeah, he lacked confidence, but he didn't lack competence.
Yeah, which is something that often gets confused. A lot of the characters where that's the story arc, they're young teenagers and they don't know what to do, and then they get in a leadership role and they're like, you, go here, you, go. Even the Avengers did that with, like, Captain America, where he's like, I don't really know these newer people and the new ways and everything. And then by the end of the Avengers, he's like, you, soldiers, go over here. You, we're going to go downtown.
Well, technically, he was already competent because he'd had years of training.
Yeah, but he is like this awkward guy, and Shadow never really had that. He was just sort of like, not as great as he could have been.
Yeah, he was just very there.
Yeah. But yeah, again, going back to the action sequences, I feel like that's one of Neil Gaiman's weaknesses.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple action sort of sequences in this. There's a part where a character I won't name gets like shot live on TV, and it's supposed to be this big dramatic thing. And I guess that kind of goes with his realism. He does a lot, again, all the characters feel kind of real, all the magic feels really real, and someone getting shot in real life is this very just sort of like, bang, oh snap, fuck. It's not really like this big dramatic, like, action.
There aren't violins going off, and there's, like, the room doesn't go silent. You're just like...
The camera shakes, and then he's lying there dead, and it's like, oh, fuck.
What the hell? Holy crap.
Yeah, or same thing, even at the end when there's a standoff against Heiselman or whatever, like, that didn't really have any dramatic tension to it.
Just gets shot and then burned alive, and then...
It's not really a big deal. Even when he was, like, swimming underneath the ice to, like, find a car that had been trapped underneath, like, even that kind of, like, lacked tension to it.
Mm-hmm.
He's very good at describing, like, people. He's very, very good at settings. I think we mentioned that at the beginning.
Yeah.
But it bears repeating. His settings are, fantastic.
Not to mention the fact that he does do the surreal actions rather well, but, like, his, that scene like we said, Heiselman getting shot, there's a scene right after that where he literally picks the memories out of somebody, and he does that in a somewhat compelling way, but the scene preceding that where you're supposed to have this
tension, there's a standoff between a mythical creature and a guy with a gun.
And it's very tense, but in the story, it's very there.
Yeah, that's one of his things. I'm interested to know if it is other stories, if he ever gets, like, better at that. I feel like he has the opposite problem as Mistborn, if you saw that. Mistborn, he had action, but he overwrought it.
Yeah.
And in this case, he just sort of, like, skips over it almost. Like, he doesn't put in any extra details that would make it, like, intense. Although, again, talking about his writing style, again, the places, very, very good. To the point we should mention, I actually took a vacation because of this book. He does a really, really good job of explaining the mystical places in America.
Yeah.
This whole thing, I guess I can explain that again because...
It is kind of we took a vacation, but yes.
Yeah, you went with me. I took Brandon with me. But he has this little moment in the book where he talks about there are mythical places in the world. And in the old world, in Europe and in Asia and stuff like that, a lot of the ancient people found these mythical places and they built like a temple there to some old like pagan god. And then... the Greeks came along and they'd build like the Oracle of Delphi. Mm-hmm. And then even as they stopped believing, that still became like a tourist attraction. Or there's a lot of places where like there was a temple to Zeus and then it became a church and then it became a mosque. And no matter what happens, that area was always a holy place.
Yeah.
But in America, because they sort of came in and wiped out the indigenous people and because they just built a church on every street because every town needed a church,
mm-hmm.
there wasn't really any sense of these holy places. They never had a feeling about them. Except some people did, but because they didn't have as strong of beliefs, it manifested in really weird places. So what would happen is you have a guy who, for no reason known to him, suddenly feels compelled to make Stonehenge out of cars on land that he doesn't own in the middle of nowhere. And Gaiman's explanation is that that part of the land is sacred, and that was how he expressed it, to build this tourist trap, this unique thing on that spot. He's like, and people go there and they feel this weird mix of being really proud, like they're connected to something mystical, and also disappointed because it's just a tourist trap.
Yeah.
And
we went to said location that they described in this book called
the House on the Rock.
Yeah, it doesn't have to do with the Stonehenge out of cars.
Yeah, that was an example. But one of the real life places that he mentions, because they have to go to a mystical site to have a meeting with a lot of the gods. The backstage in those places is like special.
Yeah.
And so they go to this place in, what was it, Michigan or Wisconsin?
I think it was Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, called the House on the Rock.
No, it's Michigan.
Michigan. Either way, it's up in like the northern Midwest. It's called the House on the Rock. It's this amazing, massive place. It started with a guy building a house on a giant rock, and then he turned his house into a tourist attraction, and then he started having, like, the world's largest carousel was there, and the world's biggest collection of doll houses, and a giant kraken made out of, like...
Oh, that was the best place.
I don't even know, and just, like, all these model ships, and just... It's
stuff torn out of a distillery. It was, and, like, biplanes, and...
What was it? The world's largest collection of automatic instruments. They have like an orchestra that's all played by machine, all like calculated together. There's just, you go there, there's stuff you could see there that you would never see anywhere else. And the way Neil describes it is just like...
is that place.
Yeah.
I listened to that scene and I was like, I know, because we...
And we should say, I read this first, and I was like, I've got to go to see the House on the Rock. It's only 6 hours away. This place is cool. I took Brandon with me, and you read the book after you had experienced it.
And I felt every step for step in there. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I know where they're at. I remember this.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
There's the part they use a little fortune teller machine, and we're like, I've got the card for that fortune teller machine.
And I don't know where it is, and it upsets me.
They're like,
It was a really cool fortune, by the way.
Yeah. That place was really neat. There's another place on there. It's like the top of the mountain or something in Tennessee.
What do you mean?
Big Little Rock, where the battle between the gods happens.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say about like the other place that was really interesting was like they have the center of America.
Oh yeah, the exact center of America, which they talk about when Odin first explains sort of how this works, the mythical places.
Mm-hmm.
Shadow is like, oh, Disneyland must be like the most mythical place ever. They're like, no. Disney wanted to build a theme park, and he just found a bunch of orange groves. That was just a spot that he thought... He didn't pick there because he was drawn to the spot. He picked it for, like, financial reasons. And so they talk about, in the, I believe, the early 1900s, a bunch of people got together and plotted out the exact geographic center of America, which is in, like, Kansas, I believe. It's like the middle of nowhere, Kansas. And they were like, this is going to be a big tourist spot. And they built like a monument there, and they built a hotel, and there's like a little town around the exact center of America. And basically, no one visited it. It was terrible. And in the story, they talk about this place is...
kind of like where dreams come to die, really.
I'm trying to think of what's the word. The place was built for such cynical reasons. It was so anti-magical. Because it was just built to be one of those places that it actually sucks the magic out of things. Like, the gods go there and they lose their powers.
They didn't say that they lose their powers, but it's very kind of like very neutral ground.
Yeah, they don't lose their powers, but they become weaker there.
Yes.
They specifically mention that the old gods and the new gods meet there because none of them could kill the other ones while they were there. The god of the internet is there, and he's just like banging his head on the wall, and he's like, it's so silent, I can't hear anything, there's no service out here. But even though it defines it like that, I still kind of want to visit just to be like, I've been to the Deadlands. I've been to the place where gods go to die, the exact center of America. Because he describes places so well. I think I'm going to put the footage up on this channel just to try to get more people. Yeah. Hopefully I can get it edited. I've been sick the last couple days, but I'd love to get that edited, have that up here, because it was a unique experience, and then maybe you could see some of the House on the Rock stuff too. again, if you're curious about America, if you want to visit America, really great story because it shows off these places like the House on the Rock and the other place I can't remember.
It's a road trip in the book. Yeah,
But yeah, now that we've praised Neil Gaiman, there's still one more point I want to make about this. Something we both agreed on, something that we didn't like about this, and I'm not sure I could see people defending this.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the cutaways, the in-between chapters, which if you haven't read it, there's these segments that cut away from Shadow's story to basically tell stories about mythological creatures or gods living in America.
Or coming to America. Really.
Either how they came to America. Sometimes it's that, or sometimes in the case of Bilquis, it didn't explain how she arrived there. It just sort of explained
how they're dealing with living around here.
Yeah, how they live in America.
There's certain, there are certain ones that are interesting, but they're all disrupting.
They're all superfluous to the story, really.
And one in specifically, they have this climax to the story is happening. Big things are happening. And then they cut to, at least in my audiobook version, was an hour out of the story to just tell me about these voodoo gods that have come over from
Haiti.
Or they came over from Africa, then were transformed in Haiti, and all this. It is interesting, but if it was its own novella just crammed inside of this story.
Yeah, it's just, I get the idea behind them. They're trying to develop the world. They're trying to tell you, like, oh, it's not just here. The gods are everywhere. They're living among us. They're doing things. I got the point after the first two. You didn't have to keep doing them. And I kept expecting a lot of these stories to sort of intertwine with things. And they sort of mention them a little bit. The fact that Bilquis existed, and then the new gods killed her, sort of showed, oh, now things are escalating.
But really, her entire existence was kind of superfluous regardless.
Yeah, they could have done that in another way.
Yeah. They already show that by having that happen later on in the story with another character. But
yeah.
Also, to just throw it out there, a lot of those segues had a lot of sex. I mean, a lot of unnecessary sex.
This is not a book for children. I should let you know.
Definitely not. You don't want to find out that apparently Jin
tastes
hot. I don't ever want to know that sentence again. And now you all know it, and thank you for
now you have to know.
Knowing is not half the battle.
And yeah, this is one of the things. This is one of the few things that we really kind of disagree with. And I'm not sure if it's just perspective or not. I'd be really curious to hear from anyone who read more. Because I feel like I've read a lot of books. I'm not really shy about sexual topics and stuff. I don't talk about it much because I feel like it's a private thing. But I see stuff like that and I just sort of take it in stride. It doesn't really stick with me. I just felt like that was something that fit in with his more mature look at life. He studies every facet of America. And sex is kind of a big part of America.
I understand that, but I've always found the idea that a mature story needing sex is a handicap. It's always been a bit of a, hey, it's mature now. Let's talk about bumpin' uglies. You could do more mature themes about possibly depression or death or adult thoughts as opposed to being like, hey, how does my wee-wee feel right now? It's both, it makes it feel very lazy writing to me, and it also jars me because I'm of a bit more of a tender sensibilities, as some who know me would know. It's just, it's not entirely necessary.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's it's not necessary, but a lot of the stuff wasn't necessary in the story, so it didn't bother me as much. But it does kind of just throw it out there, and yeah, it doesn't really say anything about sex. It's just sort of hey, it's everywhere in America. There's all sorts of people doing sexy stuff. You wouldn't even believe it.
You could have just said that. You didn't have to. He described the sex scenes more than the action scenes. Why?
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Yeah, a little disturbing. But you'll have to comment if you did read it. Did you feel like it was too much? Did it bother you? I almost feel like maybe we should read a book with more sex scenes in it, just to see how you react to it. Or maybe something specifically with themes about it.
We're not doing a CB Radio reacts to horror. It's CB Radio reacts to here's smut. Read it.
I hope you are enjoying 50 Shades of Grey, Brandon.
Why? Don't. Please don't.
I've never had to read the word clitoris so many times in a day.
The prose are so terrible.
It's so
And the
terrible.
sex is just
Apparently, it still has themes to it, though.
I don't care. At
Yeah,
this point.
I'm not really interested in reading 50 Shades of Grey. I don't even care about the sexiness part of it. It's just, I don't know. But sort of the same, I don't know. It's, when you think about Watchmen, like, Watchmen had a really big, weird, awkward sex scene.
Mhm.
I mean, arguably, part of Night Owl's whole journey is just about, like, his erectile dysfunction.
Impotence, yeah.
But I guess because, yeah, it fit into the themes of everything, so it kind of worked out. Or, like, you know, Dr. Manhattan is naked the whole time. But that's sort of, like, showing how alien and disconnected he is from people, that he's just like, I'm just going to walk around naked. Why should I care? You're just ants to me. What are you going to do, judge me for my tiny blue penis? No.
Tiny? It was big.
In the comic book, it's rendered fairly tiny.
Okay, I was just going to say, like, he gets to, like, 30 feet tall. That's
Yeah.
big.
I know there's like a funny comic somewhere where like he grows giant and Rorschach is just like blushing under his mask. He's like, oh no.
It blocks out the sun.
It blots out the sun. We just randomly go, because I'm thinking about comic books. Because I'm like, Neil Gaiman wrote comic books. He wrote the Sandman stuff.
Thank you for enjoying Let's Talk About Books. Let's get back on
Yeah,
books.
I don't know. Comics are books. I'm wondering if we should read like Watchmen or like From Hell or some other like.
I'm sure there's something out there. Like, I would love for us to do one on Fables, because that sounds like something that would be very...
Is that finished already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The entire book series is finished. There are subsequent extra books, but the entirety of the actual run of Fables, period, is done.
Ah. See, I'm kind of interested. I would want to read more of like a graphic novel that's like a little bit shorter. From what I understand, Fables is like a huge series, like a year or so long.
It is not short, no.
Yeah. And again, Watchmen would be really good to analyze, even though I've read it several times. Mouse, I'm surprised does not get noticed more.
I haven't read Mouse. I've read Watchmen.
Mouse is like the best story I've ever read about World War II and like the Holocaust. And I've read like, we read a bunch of them in schools.
Elie Wiesel's Night, yeah.
Yeah, and none of them quite conveyed it as realistic. No, that's the thing, is like there were parts of it that were horrifying, but it told it in such a personal way that I finally felt like I understood everything about it, not just the horrifying parts, but like the little parts, the things that like eat away with you, and also like, I don't know, it's really hard to explain, but it was one of the best depictions of it that I'd ever seen. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a comic book where everyone is mice and rats.
Alright, so if you guys want to hear us do one on Mouse, please tell. I can't get an audiobook of that, but
yeah. But
congrats for me.
It's not that long, and a lot of it's pictures, so you should be good. Yeah, comment in the comments if you want to see a graphic novel of any kind, either Mouse or Watchmen, or if you have other ideas. We're also thinking about maybe coming back to Wheel of Time, because I've read the next two.
Much of that.
And the first episode, where we did the first two Wheel of Time books, is our most popular episode still.
And I enjoy listening to him. I couldn't get through reading it.
Yeah.
It's really enjoyable listening to him describe the story.
So that would be another thing of me just gushing to you about the story and talking about the neat things it does.
It's pretty much how we hang out sometimes.
Yeah. There's also, potentially, MBT. I had talked to him about starting at the third book without reading the first two, because the first two are really kind of hit or miss. He hasn't responded yet, so I'm not sure if he'll do it or not. But I'm like, I'd be really interested to see if someone could jump in at the third book and hit the ground running and like understand what's going on. Because there are a lot of annoying parts where like at the start of every book, they kind of go through every character and reintroduce them and explain, oh, there's Lan. He has a face like stone. He's a warder. He's bound to Moriane. Oh, what a surprise. I've learned this already. You don't have to remind me again. So I'm wondering if a new person could, like, catch up with it.
Did you know Ash is a Pokemon trainer? Oh. Yeah.
Press B to hold Pokemon.
Yes.
Yeah, one of those two, or we might read some other fantasy thing about living ships.
Yeah, this channel is really trying to grow and become more.
Yeah, I think once we get to, like, 1,000 people, then we'll start holding polls. I was planning to do that earlier, but we still barely have an audience. I think...
So tell a friend.
Yeah, tell a friend. I have a Patreon Discord. If you're unfamiliar with me, my main channel is like a Yu-Gi-Oh channel, but I have a Patreon. Should be linked down in the description. There's a Discord. If you donate $1, you get on there. And we've been kind of doing this as a book club, getting people to read the different books and everything. Except no one read American Gods. Not a single person had a single question for it.
Really?
No one went through it. I guess it's too long for them, or just no one was interested. I got people to read Lovecraft, but
Wheel of Time is so much longer.
yeah, I don't think anyone would read Wheel of Time either. I think they just like hearing me gush about it.
Yeah, if you want to hear us gush about more books and more stuff, just tell a friend. Just be active.
Yeah,
We're here
try to spread the podcast around. Any last thoughts, Brandon?
Not really. That's American Gods was pretty fun. Yes, one last thing. And fitting it's at the end here. The ending of the story is actually really, really solid. Like, it kind of puts a lot of the themes of the character forward, and it really does that well, of Shadow and Wednesday.
Yeah.
And how it kind of wraps up their relationship of sorts.
I liked it, but I felt like the story should have ended like a lot earlier. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have a lot to say about the ending.
Yeah, I just kind of it's one of those kind of subtle endings that I like.
Yeah. How'd you do it?